May 334 BC, the Granicus River. 20,000 Persian cavalry line the east bank, javelins raised, watching a 25-year-old king wade his army into a river crossing that should kill them all. The Persians hold the high ground. They have missile superiority. Basic physics is on their side. Men climbing out of water in armor against riders firing down from stable ground. Alexander's own second-in-command begs him to wait until morning. He attacks anyway. What happens in the next hour breaks every rule of ancient warfare. Horses crush against horses in water, spears shatter. A cavalry battle turns into something Arrian will describe as infantry combat on horseback, a stabbing, shoving brawl fought face-to-face at arm's length. Alexander's helmet is split open by a Persian axe. A sword rises behind him to finish the job. One man, Clytus the Black, cuts the attacker's arm off mid-swing. The Macedonian king survives by 1 second. When the dust settles, Persia's first field army is destroyed. Alexander loses 115 men. The Persians lose their entire mercenary corps, slaughtered or chained. This is the Battle of the Granicus, the first time Alexander faced the Persian Empire in open battle, the fight that should have ended his invasion before it began. So how does a 25-year-old cross a defended river, survive a blade to the back of his skull, and shatter an army twice his size in cavalry, all in a single afternoon? This is the story of the most brutal river crossing in ancient history, and the shocking cavalry charge that broke the gates to Asia. The setup: why Alexander shouldn't be here. To understand what happens at the Granicus, we need to rewind 3 weeks. Spring 334 BC. Alexander crosses the Hellespont, the narrow strait separating Europe from Asia, with roughly 40,000 troops. He's not here to raid. He's here to destroy the Persian Empire, the superpower that invaded Greece twice, the empire that burned Athens to the ground. He's 25 years old. He's never fought Persians. And every satrap in Asia Minor knows he's coming. Here's the problem. The Persian governors don't panic. They don't scatter. They do something smarter. They assemble a blocking force and pick the ground. If Alexander wants to push inland, he has to cross the Granicus River in northwest Turkey. And they'll be waiting on the other side. Think about that. The Persians have 20,000 cavalry stretched along the eastern bank. Behind them, on higher ground, another 20,000 Greek mercenary infantry. These aren't conscripts. These are professional hoplites, Greeks fighting for Persian gold. They know Macedonian tactics. They've trained against the phalanx. The Persian plan is elegant. Let the cavalry hammer anyone crossing the river. If the Macedonians somehow survive, the mercenaries will finish them. Alexander arrives late in the afternoon. He sees the Persian line. He sees the river. He sees the steep, muddy banks on the far side. His general Parmenion, a veteran who served, Alexander's father, rides up with advice. Wait until dawn. Cross upstream while they sleep. Don't throw your cavalry into a river against a prepared enemy. Parmenion is right. Every tactical manual in history says he's right. Alexander looks at the river. No, we attack now. Stay with me, because what Alexander does next should get his entire army killed. The physics of death. Let's break down why this crossing is suicide. First, the water. The Granicus isn't deep, but it's chest-high in places. Horses struggle for footing. Riders can't swing properly. Armor becomes weight dragging you under. Second, the bank. The eastern side is steep and slick with mud. Anyone climbing out is off balance, exposed, slower than the men above them. Third, the missiles. The Persians have javelins. They have height. They can throw downward into a mass of men who can't dodge, can't raise shields properly, can't do anything except die. Fourth, the math. Defenders on solid ground always beat. Attackers in water, always. The Romans learned this at Sentinum. The Gauls learned it against Caesar. River crossings against prepared enemies are where campaigns go to die. Arrian, our best source, describes the bank as packed with Persian cavalry, shoulder to shoulder, weapons ready. This is not a battle. This is a killing field, and Alexander orders the charge anyway. Here's where it gets strange. He doesn't send his best troops first. He sends advanced squadrons, smaller units, expendable. Their job isn't to win. Their job is to fix the Persian line in place. They wade into the river. They start climbing the bank. The Persians hammer them. Javelins rain down. Horses scream. Men are cut apart before they can swing a sword. Arrian writes it simply. The first men to cross were killed almost immediately, but they buy something precious. Time, because Alexander is already moving. The diagonal. Watch what happens next. Alexander doesn't cross straight into the Persian center. He angles his companion cavalry, the elite Macedonian horsemen, obliquely across the river. A diagonal entry. Why does this matter? If you cross straight, you emerge in a tight column. The defenders focus everything on one point. You get shredded climbing out, one man at a time. But if you angle across, you spread the emergence point. You force the defenders to shift. You create chaos in their line before you even reach them. Alexander leads from the front. White plume on his helmet. Polished armor that catches the light. He wants the Persians to see him. He wants them to focus on him. The river fills with horses and men. The companions struggle for footing. Javelins splash around them. Some men go down. The rest keep pushing. And then, the bank. Alexander's horse lunges up the slope. Mud, chaos, Persian cavalry wheeling to meet him. The companions claw their way out of the water, into the teeth of the Persian line. This is the moment. If the Persians throw them back now, it's over. Alexander drowns in a river in Turkey, and the invasion dies with him. But the Persians make a mistake. They see Alexander, the white plume, the gleaming armor, and every noble in their line wants the kill. They don't hold formation. They cluster toward the king. Exactly what Alexander wanted. The brawl. Forget everything you know about cavalry battles. This isn't a charge across an open field. This isn't maneuver and counter-maneuver. This is a knife fight in a phone booth, on horseback, in mud, with spears that keep breaking. Arrian's description is haunting. It was not like a cavalry battle. It was like infantry combat on horseback. The space is so tight that horses are jammed flank to flank. Riders can't swing. They're stabbing at faces, at throats, at any gap in armor they can find. Spear shafts shatter against shields. Alexander's own spear breaks. Someone hands him another. That one breaks too. The Persian nobles, the satraps, the commanders, the best cavalry. Persia throw themselves at Alexander. They know what he looks like. They know killing him ends the war. A Persian named Mithridates charges straight at the king. Alexander drives a broken spear through his face. Another Persian, Rusoses, swings a cavalry sword and catches Alexander across the breastplate. Alexander kills him too, but he doesn't see the third man. 1 second. Spithridates, a Persian satrap. He's behind Alexander now, sword raised for a killing blow. Alexander doesn't see him. He's still fighting Rusoses, still tangled in the press of bodies and horses and broken weapons. Spithridates swings, not at the body, at the head. The blade catches Alexander's helmet and splits it open. The force staggers him. His vision blurs. He's dazed, exposed, one strike from death. Spithridates raises his sword again. This is the moment. 25 years old, conqueror of nothing yet, about to die in a river in Turkey before his legend begins. The sword starts to fall. And then a blade comes from the side. Clytus the Black, Alexander's childhood companion, a cavalry commander who's been fighting beside him since the crossing began. He sees Spithridates. He sees the sword. He doesn't have time to shout a warning. He swings his own blade and cuts off Spithridates' arm at the shoulder. The sword drops. Spithridates drops. Alexander lives. 1 second, maybe less. That's the margin between the Persian Empire surviving another century and everything that comes next. Issus, Gaugamela, Egypt, Babylon, India. The entire history of the ancient world pivots on Clitus being in the right place at the right moment with a fast enough sword. Remember that name. Clitus the Black. Because 4 years later, in Samarkand, Alexander will kill him with his own hands during a drunken argument. The man who saved his life at the Granicus will die by his spear at a banquet. But that's another story. Right now, on this riverbank, Clitus drags Alexander back into the fight. The Macedonians see their king nearly die. They see him survive, and something breaks inside them. The surge. Here's where it gets brutal. The companion cavalry doesn't retreat. They don't regroup. They surge forward, enraged, desperate, unstoppable. More Macedonians claw up the bank behind them. The line thickens. The Persians feel it shift. They've thrown their best nobles at Alexander. Mithridates is dead. Rhusaces is dead. Spithridates is bleeding out in the mud. The command structure is collapsing, and still the Macedonians keep coming. Arrian writes it in a single line. The enemy cavalry could no longer hold. The Persian center buckles. Then it breaks. Horsemen wheel and flee east, scattering across the plain. Alexander's cavalry chases them, but not far. Not far at all. Why? Because Alexander isn't stupid. The cavalry battle is won, but the battle isn't over. Think about the Persian formation. 20,000 cavalry on the riverbank. And behind them, 20,000 Greek mercenaries. Professional hoplites. Still on the field, still in formation, still very much alive. The Persian cavalry just abandoned them. The trap. Put yourself on that hillside for a moment. You're a Greek mercenary. You've taken Persian gold to fight against other Greeks, against Macedonians, against Alexander. You watched the cavalry battle from higher ground. You watched the Persians lose. Now the cavalry is gone. Fled. And Alexander's entire army is turning toward you. You have two options. Fight against a victorious enemy with cavalry on your flanks, phalanx to your front, and no reinforcements coming. Or surrender. Throw down your weapons. Beg for terms. Hope the 25-year-old king is merciful. The mercenaries choose option 2. They send envoys. They offer to lay down arms. Alexander's response? No. No terms. No surrender. No mercy. Stay with me, because what happens next is the darkest part of this battle. The slaughter. Alexander refuses the surrender for one reason. These are Greeks fighting Greeks. In his mind, in the propaganda he's been building since he crossed the Hellespont. This is a pan-Hellenic crusade. Greece against Persia, civilization against barbarism, and Greeks who take Persian money to kill other Greeks. Traitors, all of them. The Macedonian phalanx advances up the hill. The cavalry circles behind. The mercenaries have nowhere to go. What follows isn't a battle. It's an execution. The phalanx pins them from the front. 16-foot sarissas pushing into the mass. The mercenaries can't break through, can't retreat, can't do anything but die where they stand. Arrian doesn't glorify it. Most were killed where they stood. The few who survive, roughly 2,000 men, are chained and sent to Macedonia. Not as prisoners of war, as slaves. They'll spend the rest of their lives in mines and labor camps, an example to any Greek thinking about Persian employment. The mercenary corps is annihilated. The Persian cavalry is scattered. The satraps who planned this defense are dead or fleeing. In a single afternoon, Alexander has destroyed Persia's first field army in Asia Minor. The casualty count tells the story. Macedonian losses, 25 companion cavalry, 60 other horsemen, maybe 30 infantry, 115 men. Persian losses, over 1,000 cavalry dead, and an entire mercenary army, 18,000 men, killed or enslaved. 115 against 18,000. This is what impossible looks like. The controversy. Now, here's where historians argue. Everything I've just told you comes primarily from Arrian, writing 400 years after the battle. He based his account on eyewitness sources, Ptolemy and Aristobulus, men who were actually there. But there's another account, Diodorus Siculus. Diodorus tells a different story. In his version, Alexander doesn't attack in the afternoon. He camps for the night, crosses at dawn, and fights in the morning. Why does this matter? Because it changes everything about Alexander's psychology. If Arrian is right, Alexander is insanely aggressive, attacking into a prepared enemy at the worst possible time, gambling everything on shock and speed. If Diodorus is right, Alexander is more cautious, waiting for better conditions, crossing when the Persians might be less alert. Modern historians mostly side with Arrian. Diodorus gets key details wrong. His sequence doesn't match the other sources. The scholarly consensus calls his account confused and unreliable. But here's the truth. We're still arguing about a battle that happened 2,300 years ago. The exact topography, the precise sequence, the real numbers, some of it we'll never know for certain. What we do know is the outcome. Alexander crossed, Alexander survived, Alexander won, and nothing in Asia Minor could stop him now. The gates swing open. Watch what happens in the weeks after Granicus. The Persian satraps who survived are running east toward the interior, toward the king in Susa. They're not regrouping. They're not planning a counterattack. They're just gone. And the Greek cities of Asia Minor, they start flipping, one by one. Sardis opens its gates. Ephesus welcomes Alexander as a liberator. Miletus resists and gets crushed. Halicarnassus holds out longer and gets crushed harder. The pattern is clear. Fight Alexander, lose everything. Welcome Alexander. Keep your city. Within months, the entire western coast of Turkey is under Macedonian control. The Persian navy, cut off from its bases, starts to collapse. The strategic situation has completely reversed. One battle, one river crossing, and the gates to Asia swing open. Here's where it gets interesting. Granicus isn't just a military victory, it's a propaganda masterpiece. Alexander collects 300 suits of Persian armor from the battlefield, the best pieces, the ones worn by the nobles he killed at the riverbank. He ships them to Athens, the city Persia burned 150 years earlier, with a specific inscription. Won by Alexander and the Greeks, except the Lacedaemonians. Read that again. Except the Lacedaemonians. Except the Spartans. Sparta refused to join Alexander's campaign. They sat it out. And now, on the most prominent temple in Athens, there's a monument to Greek victory that specifically excludes them. The dig is intentional. The message is clear. This is a pan-Hellenic crusade, and Sparta chose the wrong side of history. Think about that level of political calculation. Alexander is 25. He just fought the most desperate battle of his life. He nearly died in a river, and his first thought afterward is propaganda, how to frame this victory for maximum political impact back home. This is not just a warrior. This is something more dangerous. The shadow. But there's a darker side to Granicus, one that doesn't show up in the victory monuments. Those 2,000 Greek mercenaries sent to Macedonia in chains? They're not criminals. They're soldiers who took a job. Many of them probably had families in Greece, wives, children. They'll never see them again. Alexander's justification, traitors to the Greek cause, is propaganda. It's a convenient story. The reality is simpler and uglier. He wanted to send a message. Fight for Persia, lose everything. It worked. After Granicus, Greek mercenaries become much harder for Persia to recruit. The price of Persian gold just went up. But there's another shadow, one that won't fall for 4 more years. Clitus the Black, the man who saved Alexander's life on the riverbank, the childhood friend who cut off Spithridate's arm 1 second before the killing blow. In 328 BC, Alexander throws a banquet in Samarkand. There's drinking, there's argument. Clitus, drunk, angry, starts criticizing Alexander. He says Alexander has forgotten his Macedonian roots. He says Alexander owes his victories to his soldiers, not to himself. He says Alexander owes his life to Clitus. Alexander grabs a spear from a guard and drives it through Clitus's chest, the man who saved his life at. Granicus dies by his hand at a party. When Alexander sobers up, he's devastated. He refuses to eat for days. He calls himself a murderer. But Clitus is still dead. Stay with me. Because this is the paradox of Alexander. The same king who survives impossible odds, who inspires fanatic loyalty, who builds an empire from Greece to India, that same king kills his oldest friend over a drunken insult. The greatness and the darkness live in the same body. Granicus shows you the greatness. Samarkand shows you the cost. The numbers. Let's return to the riverbank one last time. 115 Macedonians dead. An entire Persian army destroyed. Those numbers seem impossible. They seem like propaganda. And maybe they are, a little. Ancient casualty figures are notoriously unreliable. But even if Alexander lost twice that many, even 3 times, it's still a miracle. He crossed a defended river against cavalry. He survived an axe to the skull. He broke a Persian line that should have held. He did it in a single afternoon, with a single charge, at 25 years old. The Persians had every advantage: terrain, numbers, position. Physics itself was on their side. And they lost. Here's what Granicus proves. Alexander doesn't fight like other commanders. He doesn't calculate acceptable losses. He doesn't minimize risk. He puts himself at the point of maximum danger and bets everything on breaking the enemy's will before they break his. It's insane. It's reckless. It works. At Granicus, it almost didn't. 1 second slower from Clitus, and Alexander dies in that river. The invasion ends. Persia survives. History rewrites itself, but Clitus wasn't slower, and Alexander didn't die. The road from here. Granicus opens the road east. 2 years later, Alexander meets the Persian king Darius himself at Issus, and shatters his army so completely that Darius flees the battlefield in his chariot, leaving his family behind. 2 years after that, at Gaugamela, Alexander destroys the last great Persian army. Darius runs again. This time, his own men murder him. By 330 BC, Alexander controls the largest empire the world has ever seen: Babylon, Persepolis, Susa, all of it. But it starts here, on a muddy riverbank in Turkey, with a cavalry charge that defied every rule of ancient warfare. Granicus isn't Alexander's most famous battle. That's Gaugamela, the one that ended the empire. But Granicus is the proof of concept, the moment Alexander shows the world what he is. A king who attacks when he should wait, who leads from the front when he should command from behind, who survives when he should die. 115 men lost, an empire's first army destroyed, a 25-year-old king who should be dead at the bottom of a river, riding east toward Persia with blood on his armor and the taste of impossible victory in his mouth. The Persian nobles at Granicus had one job: stop Alexander at the river. They held the high ground. They had the numbers. They had every advantage that mattered. And when the Macedonian cavalry came out of that water, clawing up the muddy bank with broken spears and desperate fury, those nobles learned something that would echo across the ancient world. Some men don't calculate odds. Some men just charge. May 334 BC, the Granicus River. A white plume disappears into the chaos. A helmet splits. A sword rises. And 1 second later, an empire starts to fall.